All right. Thanks, Ruben. Christy and I moved to Geita, Tanzania in 2009. And Christy's seeing these photos for the first time. I even told Ruben she's going to be upset about some of the photos on the screen. But we moved in 2009 to Geita, Tanzania. There on the bottom left, you can see us in language school in our first couple of months. The top left photo is us at the house that we rented and lived in for 12 years in rural Tanzania. And then some of you may recognize this refrigerator magnet of Christy and I with our favorite child. At the time, in 2009, she was the only one. All three of our children were born in Tanzania, and of course things have changed over the years. We've been there 14 years now, and 3 Chopped has been with us the entire time. So what I'd like to do this morning, as our time with 3 Chopped comes to an end, after 14 years of doing mission in Tanzania together, what I'd like to do is let you know what are we doing in our next chapter? Where are we going from here? And then before I do that, I want to just thank you. And not everyone's here that I'd like to thank, but first of all, I want to thank you. My wife grew up here in this church, and she has a special fondness and a particular appreciation for many of you. She is a testament to who this church is and what you want out of your youth. And so I appreciate that. We also appreciate your financial commitment over the last 14 years. 3 Chopped has been our second largest donor, and there's no way we could have accomplished what we've done without you. We also want to thank you for friendship and encouragement. In addition to emails, conversations, and visits while we've been here, 3 Chopped has sent representatives over 3 times to visit us in person. And that was when we lived in rural Tanzania, which wasn't quite as pleasant a place to visit. And I want to thank specifically, Ben has kind of taken a role of being someone to offer me guidance and allow me to bounce ideas off of him. And he's kind of taken that role from Eddie. Lastly, I want to thank Shirley Herod for hosting us in our house, letting us make a mess of her house the last 2 times we've been to Richmond, letting us eat all of her food. We really appreciate that. And then lastly, he's not here, but Mike Palmer is an okay guy. I've gone the wrong way. All right. So we're 2.5 years into a transition, a 5-year transition to business as mission. And essentially what we're doing is we're creating a redemptive business that will transform communities. The goal is for long-term sustainability in our kingdom work in Tanzania, and we think we can do that through business. There are lots of ways that we could accomplish that, and I don't have time to speak to all of them. And there's lots of reasons why we've done this, but essentially what we've created, much of what you may know is one of the jobs I have is I organize endurance racing events, mountain bike and trail running events on Kilimanjaro. And I think many of you have heard that, and I've talked about it in the past, but what I'm not sure that I've done a good job of is sharing how does that business actually impact the local communities. And why is that the route that I've chosen to go? I want to talk about one very specific thing today, and that is outside leadership and being a catalytic ministry. And so the idea here, I'm going to read this. I won't read many of the slides, but I have experienced a personal paradigm shift from a missionary visioned and driven work to a role of supporting and encouraging African leaders as partners and peers. So the idea of being a catalyst and an outside leader, for me, is a shift I wanted to make out of traditional missions. Traditional missions is still something that people can do in many places in the world. There are many reasons it's not a good fit in Tanzania. I don't have time to talk with you about all of those, but I want to share one idea specifically. I'm happy to speak with you about some of the others in person if you'd like to chat. But essentially, traditional missions held that the missionaries came in and they took a leadership position within the church in Tanzania. And that means they had power and they had control. Sometimes that's through finances, sometimes that's through religion or networking back to churches in the U.S., but they come in with power and control and they have leadership positions. Only when the church reaches maturity, which is difficult to know when that is, only when the church reaches maturity then do they hand over that power, hand over that leadership position to the local church. So what we're attempting to do is never hold a leadership position in the African church to begin with. Rather, I serve as an outside leader, meaning I'm a resource, I'm an advisor, and I'm a catalyst. And so the idea there is I can spark change by igniting action in an existing structure, the Tanzanian church with its Tanzanian leadership. So incarnational ministry. Did I skip a... Oh, there it is there. Essentially, I just threw in some pictures of what I think incarnational ministry looks like. These are several leaders. You can see on the top left, I'm sitting at a table eating rice with 4 church leaders. Ben knows probably all 4 of them, but for sure he knows 2 of them well. And then you can see those 4 guys leading in different ways as we've invested in them rather than me coming in and having that position of power. Paul makes it clear in Philippians 2 that we should have the attitude that Christ had in giving up power to live among people. Incarnational ministry is living among people, and even more so, being one of them. And so I've written down just 3 sentences I wanted to read. This is kind of my thesis for the shift. Effective incarnational ministry cannot be accomplished from a position of power. The surrender of power is a prerequisite for common mutuality and Christ-likeness. It is by dying to self in humble service to others that redemption is made available for all. That's kind of my thesis here. So I'm no longer a leader in the Tanzanian church, but rather I'm a servant to my African brothers and sisters. And so I'm serving them now. I've pinpointed what I've done over the last several years is I've pinpointed a few very unique areas based on my talents and abilities and skills, past experience, pinpointed 2 specific areas where I can serve the African church. And those are agriculture and sport. And so what we've done is we've developed a platform, which is Red Knot Tanzania, our company in Tanzania. And from that platform, we're able to work in agriculture and in sport. And that's how we're able to impact the African church. This should be a video that will play. Do I have to do anything to make it? Okay.
Mandakay miyete na kanyang gesa kay barodam asisa mindem baro na haw kia barija kia ya je hawak ke bikte ya ga ko hedu humungen ne nish kia ya ji jalot asisa kay jalot agi ga ine kay de mi go he ko sipsi go ke de go he do ko he te di go ki mu la kwa he do ga diet hayu go ise jalot ga nyod be ga diet den ha uhudang kan
I went to the Datoga and I led a seminar that weekend. I taught some from scripture, I taught some from science, we taught some theory, we did practical out in the field and showed them exactly how they could plant to do some things differently. And I had a great time. It was enjoyable. The Datoga were so hospitable, so friendly, so welcoming, and so appreciative that I'd come. But I left assuming nothing would happen, nothing would come from it. It was several months later, I got a phone call from one person in the Togoland. And I was told, my maize has produced more than any of my neighbors. And I'm so glad you taught us what you taught us, because this is really working and we can't wait to learn more. When can you come back? And I thought, I can't believe this has happened. So yeah, that was the beginning. That was the beginning. At the time, I was volunteering with One World Sustainable Livelihoods. And so I asked Crispin Mirambo, Crispin, will you go back with me, because I want you to meet these Datoga people. They're very open to learning. They're very anxious to improve their systems for agriculture and potentially in other areas as well. I'd like you to meet them because I think this is a group that needs help. Few people are helping them and we can do it. And so Crispin was happy to come.
My name's Crispin Mirambo. I work for One World Sustainable Livelihood, a local Tanzanian NGO. One World is promoting several technologies to rural communities. One of them is fish farming, vegetable gardening, raising of local chickens, conservation agriculture, beekeeping, and also in the future we will be introducing dairy goats.
We're on site here at a farm in Ola City, Arusha, Tanzania. This farm is a partnership between One World Sustainable Livelihoods and Red Knot Tanzania. What we do here is we're demonstrating a number of agricultural techniques and systems that can assist rural farmers to improve their livelihoods and to navigate the food scarcity that currently they are experiencing.
Mafundisho yanada gagona faida bagdia ba ngane boga heda waste asi state gda sin nada ne asi amboga musmangi mulai ala mudiati na miyaga hobar hebe bagdia ber kam murdianga si amana ngane mi goradu ya bartange ni kita waste asi nada ne asi na gonda heda bar hebe aki boga nyawe magurgi
ya kamne e shinne la muche bagdia be dibuke sakana na wai kinanya sadu fakarenge gide bi hidu murade ne kukunda yesu ananya sker heke da faksa abachilenga yega dibuga wanda gene wai sakondari ananya sker da faksa kamne erabune da waskiskeude e nusalli ses isa wan erage hed wasal geweki ge india nge gesal geweki kawe de serani hagamne isi hudenya ni jaderi surgu la pieza ngobole dibuga sakondari kanyasi hekeda.
There are a number of actors cooperating, partnering, and working together to do this work. And so it's not something that any one of us has ownership over or is claiming we've done on our own, but when this project grew big enough that I couldn't assist in a major way, One World Sustainable Livelihoods has moved on and brought on other partners that can do what I couldn't do.
After going to Africa, to Tanzania, and visiting and actually meeting the people that are benefiting from it, I'm even more motivated now because I see that change is happening and the money is going to something and it's doing good.
And when you sit there and visit with these people over there and they give you a heartfelt thank you, you appreciate, you realize that you have taught them to be and gave them the dignity to be self-sufficient. And that's something you realize that, hey, we did something great.
Gawo sanyimuchi na kono danya ser gro ta kadiye da nyimuchi da banda bare dang bune da helle wana barbara.
So the way we've structured things is that Red Knot Racing Company is an LLC here in the US. Red Knot Development is a 501c3 nonprofit here in the US. Both of those entities work with Red Knot Tanzania, which is a company limited by shares in Tanzania, and Red Knot Tanzania carries out both development and mission work while also carrying out the for-profit businesses. And so Red Knot Racing Company operates 4 races per year. 3 of them we own. We have a trail running race in September, which has a half marathon, a full marathon. I'm in kilometers. A 67 kilometer and a 74 kilometer. So that's something like 40 miles. 40 miles and about 48 miles, something like that. Ultra marathons that are on Kilimanjaro up to a height of around 13,000 feet on the mountain. and back down. So we do that race every September, Kilimanjaro Trail Run. In January, we do Kili Trails Festival, which is a big event with live music, food vendors, 12 different races throughout the weekend. We have everything from a 1-mile fun run for children, which is free, all the way up to a 6-hour ultra marathon. In the mountain bike races, we've got a 6K race for children, so about 4 miles, all the way up to, I think our longest race is 100K, so 62 miles. And we had over 700 people at Kili Trails Festival 2023. We're expecting 1,000 at our 2024 event. And then we also have a 4-day, which we're about to change and make it a 5-day mountain bike race from Kilimanjaro to Lake Natron, which is a very unique place in Tanzania. That's a highly technical, very difficult bike race. We limit that race to 80 participants, and you've really got to be a very experienced mountain biker to complete that race. So those are the 3 races we own. Then we also operate as consultants a few races for other people. There's one big race we operate every year, a 250-kilometer, 5-day running race. And then we also volunteer with Rotary and some other organizations in Tanzania to do timing and registration for some of their events as volunteers. So that's kind of the racing side of the business. And that's where we really think revenue generation is going to come long term. That combined with safaris and Kili climbs that people add on to their races. So we've got a lot of international competitors. 2% of all of our revenue goes into Red Knot development, which is then going into the development work and the mission work that we do. Red Knot development exists in the US. So we do have some donors who are putting money in monthly to go towards some of the projects specifically. I am the director of Red Knot development. I don't take any salary from that group. Right now, our accountant, who is my mom, she's up here next to Christy, would know better than me, but it's got to be more than 90% of all the money that goes in. It must be 95 or 98, I don't know. Of all the money that goes in, goes directly to the projects. We also have a few grants. I'll tell you about one of those grants soon, which is some curriculum writing for youth running clubs. But we have a couple of grants for writing curriculum. That money's coming in also through Red Knot Development. Red Knot Tanzania, you saw, has a demonstration farm in Tanzania. So we do run that demonstration farm. We have 14 full-time employees doing mostly agriculture and mostly agriculture work related to that farm and the area where we live. We do field work in the bush with these Datoga farmers, who I'll tell you more about. And we're starting a few more projects as funds come in to do agriculture development. Crispin Mirambo is a partner in Red Knot Tanzania. And Crispin has been working in development in Tanzania for longer than I have. I think he must be 25 years in now in development work in Tanzania. So Crispin and I partner on those projects. I'm the soils expert. He is the livestock expert. And then we've hired on a young woman named Nashesha, who is our kitchen garden and organic vegetable production expert. So we operate that farm to train farmers. And then also we use the same staff to help us set up those races. So that's kind of how everything sits. But what I want you to understand really is, how are we impacting the kingdom in Tanzania through these organizations? And so this story that you saw briefly, the video, I want to give you the full story, because this video was actually made for another organization, Growing Hope Globally, who are raising funds to help the Datoga farmers. And so they didn't tell the whole story. The video was made by them. I want to tell you the rest of the story. Essentially, the Datoga people are pastoralists. So it means they're accustomed to livestock. They were nomadic. They would travel around with their livestock, and they just feed the livestock wherever they traveled, and that's the way they moved. But due to population growth and constraints in terms of land, private land areas, etc., they're losing the space to have cattle. And so what they're doing now is they're having to live in very small areas, and they've also been cheated out of some land. This is a group that's been harmed by other groups, and they're living in small areas, and they're having to learn to farm. In 2016, a group of Kenyan Churches of Christ, among the Kalenjin people, based somewhere near Eldoret, this group of churches, I think it was something like 60 churches, small Kenyan churches, got together. They said, you know, we've had missionaries coming to us for years. We need to start sending missionaries out. And so they found Zephaniah and Gladys. Zephaniah is a retired school teacher. He's Kalenjin. He was a member of the church since he was a child. And they found Zephaniah, who was retired. They said, Zephaniah and Gladys, would you be willing to be our missionaries to Kenya? To Tanzania. And they said, we'd love to consider that. What would it look like? So they started doing some research. They started doing some visits. They found that the Datoga people are related to the Kalenjins. So they have a similar background in history. Their language is not the same, but it's similar. And so these churches started pooling all of their money together, and they sent Zephaniah and Gladys to Haidam to work with the Datoga. The Datoga are food insecure, they're hungry, and there are no churches in villages, in rural villages. The only churches that exist are in town centers. And so they sent Zephaniah and Gladys. Zephaniah and Gladys found the mission work and evangelism to be very slow and very difficult among such a traditional group of people. They started doing some programs with literacy training, thinking we need a way to gain credibility in this area and to gain access to new people. They started doing some literacy trainings, and they found those went well. People responded well to being served in that way. They were doing literacy trainings alongside their evangelism. But people continued to ask, can you help us with farming? So eventually I got a call in Gaeta, which is, a 12-hour drive away. They said, can you come and do a training? I said, you want me to come and do one training? And they said, yeah, we desperately need you to come and do a training to teach people how to grow maize. And out of respect for Zephaniah and Gladys, the Kenyan churches, and a few American missionaries who are asking with them for me to go, I said, okay, I'll go. I was certain nothing would come of it. I've worked with traditional groups in the past, and very rarely will you see anything good come out of such a short seminar. It's just a one-weekend seminar. But out of respect for them, I said, okay, I'll go. And then I went and did the very first training, and that's kind of where that video picks up. But things moved from there. More and more people started using this method of farming maize. They started asking to learn more. Crispin and I started going back and teaching on some other subjects. Eventually, it was these farmers teaching their neighbors, and things started to really shift. And this entire time, Zephaniah and Gladys were doing evangelism, not me. In the initial visit, I taught some theology alongside agriculture to show these two go together. There's an integration here that we need to pay attention to. But I never taught Bible there again. I would only come in and teach agriculture on the side of Zephaniah and Gladys doing evangelism. It's funny, now that things have kind of really taken off, and I'll tell you where things have gone, but now that things have really taken off, Gidufana is a young man. He's not in the video, but he's a young man who's now one of our extension agents in that area. We've hired him, and he works in that area doing agricultural extension. And Gidufana said, I've done this maize. I saw how well it worked for these ladies. I've done conservation agriculture. I'm getting loads of maize. This is incredible. And he came to our demonstration farm to visit. And we were sitting and talking, just wasting time, chatting while we were waiting on food or something. And I said, Gidufana, let me tell you, I've never told you that I'm so surprised that things have gone well with this project. I was certain nothing would come out of my visit there. Only out of respect for Zephaniah and Gladys and Filden and Janet and the churches in Kenya did I ever even show up. And he said, really? And he was so surprised. And he kind of got this strange smirk on his face, and I couldn't tell what he wanted to say. And finally, it's like he got up his bravery and he said, I want to tell you something, Brett. I never, ever thought that this agriculture would do anything useful. I only planted the way you told us out of respect for you because you drove 12 hours. and apparently that's really how the story went. It was just people having respect for one another, some sort of common mutuality, seeing one another as people, as humans, giving their time. Who are you and why do you care about me? And that's the only reason he planted. Today, every time I look down at my notes, I get really loud. Today, there have been 239 baptisms in 14 different villages among the Datoga, and there are multiple churches that have been planted. So the idea of catalytic, an outside leader doing catalytic ministry, the idea that I come along an African movement, and I'm not in charge. I don't have power. I'm a servant to the movement that exists. I can use my talent and experience and also our business and our revenue in order to multiply the impact that the Kenyan and Tanzanian churches already can make. Any true impact, though, long term, I believe, has to involve generational transformation. So one of my regrets, now it wasn't a conscious decision that we made, but one of my regrets about our 12 years in Geita, in rural Tanzania, was that I worked almost exclusively with adults. Generally, they were over 50 years old. So I'm working with farmers and church leaders, which is wonderful. I was able to influence things in a great way. But what I didn't do is I didn't invest in youth. And I am confident, so confident, that lasting impact only comes from generational transformation among communities. And so we've got to be investing in youth. And that's one of the big changes I wanted to make with our new shift, is I wanted to spend more time investing in youth. In Tanzania, 50% of our population is under the age of 18. And it is an overlooked demographic. Many churches don't pay attention to the youth. Many parents don't listen to the youth. The youth are an overlooked demographic, and in many ways they're oppressed and they're not invested in. And this is a difference that I'd like to make. So what we're doing now is we are writing curriculum. That curriculum should be ready for field testing in September. We're writing curriculum that will promote spiritual and physical health among children. And that curriculum is then going to be used in a variety of youth clubs that we start. Running clubs, cycling clubs, gardening clubs, coding and computer clubs. The vision is to start a number of these youth clubs so that every youth can find something that they'd like to participate in, and they learn about God, they learn about what Christ can do in their life, they learn about washing their hands, they learn about how to make good decisions in life, they learn about goal setting and dreaming big for the future. They learn about how to break that down into smaller objectives. It's a full curriculum, 24 lessons I think right now, so it's about a half year. And so we're working on that curriculum. We've decided to start with running. So in the beginning, running is a great way to do that. And so we're starting with running curriculum, but the life skills and spiritual training that's combined with it inside that running curriculum, we'll be able to then pull out and stick into, just kind of copy paste into all of these other clubs that we'll be doing in the future. I've trained 2 dioceses of the African Inland Church in Tanzania, the Geita Diocese and the Mara Region Diocese. I've trained them in how to do youth running clubs using a previous version of the curriculum, and that's where we decided we needed to rewrite in that training. But that training was about 2 years ago. There are now more than 80 youth running clubs in Geita and Mara Region, impacting over 2,200 children. And so that's how quickly this is spreading. What we're doing is we're training churches how they can use our curriculum and how we can train their coaches to do youth running clubs. And so once our curriculum's finished, we'll be field testing starting in September, and then we'll be going over that curriculum with our larger network. So eventually that curriculum will be adopted for use in 6 countries. There's already a donor organization that has sponsored the writing of that curriculum and is sponsoring the training of all of these organizations throughout East Africa. So there will be 6 countries that are using this curriculum, and we will be responsible for overseeing the curriculum right and then the training of coaches and even the setting up of monitoring and evaluation systems, and also helping them all set up their child safeguarding policies, which is something that's lacking where we are. And so we'll be assisting them with all that. Our goal, actually, before I tell you our goal, the network already, this network we're working with, they already have over 600 youth running clubs in East Africa, which means they are impacting over 17,000 children. So the idea is I can serve the larger Christian movement in East Africa by making youth outreach, development, and education easily attainable for every church that is interested in operating youth running clubs. So that's kind of our vision for the future there. That's how we're able to come alongside the African church, assist them to multiply their impact instead of imposing our vision. That is all that I have prepared. I wanted to make sure, usually you guys know I come with way too much information, and then I don't have time for questions and answers. So I've left 20 minutes, I think, for some questions and answers. I do have one more thing I'll share at the very end, but I have some time for question and answers if you're willing to ask. If not, I'll figure out something more to talk about. Yes, sir.
Your 3 children were born in Tanzania. How do you get them back to the United States as citizens? Question 1, I have another.
Okay. Our 3 children were born in Tanzania. How does that work with citizenship? Our children were all born in Tanzania. We immediately go to the U.S. Embassy and we request citizenship, and we have it and a passport within 6 weeks.
Okay.
So it's a fairly easy process. They're not Tanzanian citizens. They're only U.S. citizens.
Okay. The next thing is that a certain group of America has gone to Rwanda and took over. It's good that you people don't take over. You'll be a part instead of taking over the churches in Tanzania. But in Rwanda, a group of Americans have gone there and took over the whole country where the laws are considered and established capital punishment for homosexualism, prostitution, and all of that. So I just want to show the contrast where American missionaries have gone to other countries and what they have done there.
I don't know much about that specific. Oh, the question. Yeah. That question is, basically it's not a question, it's just contrasting an experience in Rwanda where American missionaries went over and kind of just took over the church. And then they imposed their vision on the group to do what they desire in terms of rules and laws instead of working alongside people. Is that accurate? Yeah. Which I don't know much about the Rwanda situation, but it's extremely common. It's extremely common to have missionaries from not only the U.S. but from all over the world who show up and they have power and control. It's often through finances, and that's how they run things the way they'd like them to be run. We've never done that in our mission. Even when the first 12 years, when we were more traditional versions of missionaries, we tried to remain outside leaders and advisors and resource. In fact, we got into some what's a polite way to say, some disagreements with visitors who would come in and see that our churches were not doing something, the churches we were working with were not doing something they believed to be scripturally required. And they would come to me and say, well, I'll give you a very clear example, and this may upset some of you, but this is how it is. They came and they said, why didn't we take communion today? I said, you'll have to ask the church leadership about that. And they said, well, do you know why? I said, I have a good idea why. And it's that this church and many churches in Africa believe deep down that in order to have some kind of higher access to God, to be a leader in the church, you need to have some higher position. So they want to wait until someone important within the church is there to lead them in communion. And they've asked me numerous times, will I lead them in communion? And I refuse, because I don't want to further that thinking. It's the same reason I've never baptized someone in Tanzania. I've been asked, can you come and baptize? No, I'll teach you how to baptize. I'll teach on baptism, but I'm not going to baptize anyone. That's your job. You're going to do that. And so this individual said, well, why don't have you studied communion with them? I said, yeah, we've studied it together. I told them I think they're really missing out by not doing this every week. And but this is where they are, and it's a movement that's growing, and these are church leaders. These guys are in their 50s and their 60s. They've been Christians for 20 years, and I'm in no position to force them to do what I want them to do. And he said, well, are you sure? Are you sure you can't force them? And I said, how do you want me to force them? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do to force them to do what you want them to do? And in the end, can you withhold money from them? And my answer was, I don't give them any money. Like that's part of the issue, is people are using finances to keep control. And I said, I don't give them any money. Now when I visit, I put in the collection plate like anyone else. But I'm not paying their preacher. I'm not paying for the building of their building because we didn't think that was a sustainable practice that could be reproduced. And so we haven't done it. But yeah, far too often, I think people come in with their agenda and they impose it on others. And then what they do is at the 6-year mark or the 8-year mark, they say, okay, now it's time for us to transition out and go back to the U.S. And now we need to give you leadership of this thing that we have supplied all of the vision and we've created exactly how we want it. And we want you to run it just like we have. And I don't like the system. I don't think it's a Christ-like system. Other questions? Yeah.
So are your races meant to be revenue generators or more outreach?
The races are meant to be revenue generators. So I struggled with that because I really wanted everything within the business to be redemptive. And it's true, some of these races, they're not really for outreach. Now we have spiritual conversations. Every person who travels to Tanzania and runs in one of our races or cycles in one of our races asks me, why are you doing this? Why do you care about development work? Why are you living here? And I always tell them it's because of my faith in Christ and because of who I am and what I believe. I believe that I should sacrifice myself in order to bear the burdens and responsibilities of those around me to participate in the redemption of the world. That's what Christianity is for me. And so that's why I'm here. So I'm probably planting some seeds. Ben asked me yesterday, do I feel like my role is seed planter? And not at all. I mean, I'm probably planting some seeds. I don't think that's my real role. I don't think that's my gift. I'm much better at influencing and educating those within the church to assist them in doing what they do with multiplied impact. Yeah. The race side has been, everything's going really well. We've had multiple pro racers come, and nearly every one of them has said of the 4-day mountain bike race, this is the best stage race I've ever done in the world. These are people that do 2 or 3 a year all over the world. So everything's going really well, except we've not really spent the money we probably need to really advertise those races. And fortunately, it's starting to work by word of mouth, organic growth, and I think we're going to get there. I'll be actually in August at the Leadville 100. It's a really famous 100-mile run and 100-mile mountain bike, and they've invited me to come and set up at their expo to advertise at their events as a partner, because they've said, well, we like what you're doing. And in fact, they reached out to me, which is incredible, because I can't believe the Leadville 100 knows who we are. But they said, we've seen what you're doing, we've watched some of your videos, we want to offer our runners and cyclists a way to use their passion to travel internationally and impact local communities. Can we do that through you? I said, absolutely. Yes. I do not give out any literature at the races, no. No, the most we do is kind of I call it he who has ears language, which is, I do speak in a slightly veiled, like Jesus perhaps, way about Christianity in front of everyone. And usually that is by saying, the reason I do this is I believe that the solution to the world's problems is to sacrifice myself to bear others' burdens and responsibilities to participate in redeeming the world. And that's about as explicitly Christian as those events are. Now, we're explicitly Christian in a lot of our other work, but not in the races. They're mostly meant for revenue generation. I was having a hard time figuring out how can we really scale all of this development and mission work without asking for more donor money. And some really big international races is our best solution. Yep.
That seems like a unique constraint placed on yourself. Is how do I scale without extra resources?
Yeah. It was a foolish constraint I put on myself.
Okay.
And yeah. Which is why now you see everywhere I go, I say you can contribute financially towards our long-term sustainability. It was a foolish constraint that I put on myself. For some reason, I had in my mind, I really, really want to make this thing sustainable long-term through a business. And over the years, multiple people have convinced me, Brett, people want to be a part of what you're doing. They want to support it. They believe in it. So you need a mechanism for that. So that's one of the reasons we have Red Knot Development, so that money can be donated tax deductibly to what we're doing, and then that money goes directly into the mission and development work. We even allow people to earmark their funds for particular projects, and over the next year we'll be increasing our attempts to gain contributions that way.
Where do you foresee, or where do you believe the most growth will come, either on the business side or in the mission work? And then how are you resource constrained, or where are the constraints to that growth?
Right now, our constraints are that we're operating this demonstration farm at a loss of about $1,500 a month. When we know, now we're paying all the staff out of the company's making some money, but we're operating that demonstration farm at a loss of about $1,500 a month, when we could be renting out that side of the property where the farm is for probably $2,000 or $3,000 a month, meaning it's like a $4,000 plus swing that we're losing right now. So what we're doing is we're trying to find a way to make the farm long-term sustainable. It's not large enough to produce enough revenue to pay for the night guards and the gardeners and everything that we're doing on site for classroom trainings, the staff that are doing extension classes. So we're trying to find a way to make that sustainable long-term. So one of our solutions is to build a dormitory / indoor-outdoor guest house that we can use for visiting farmers and extension officers when they come for trainings. But then we can rent that out to foreign tourists who want kind of a glamorous camping. Have you heard of that glamping experience? Glamorous camping experience. And so we'll be hosting those right on site, potentially even with permaculture design courses and development courses that people can come do. And we think that'll take care of that. But our biggest constraint right now is financial. We need to grow faster, and I can't do really any more work than what I'm doing. And so I say it's financial. I mean, honestly, it's probably personnel. What I really need is a partner to come on and who is capable and competent at doing a lot of this work. And we do have a missionary friend, Jason Miller and Emily Miller, have been in Mwanza, Tanzania for longer than we've been in Tanzania. So I think they arrived 4 years before us. I have hired Emily with the curriculum development money. I've hired Emily to help me write the curriculum. So she's writing Youth Running Club's curriculum, and she'll be helping with monitoring and evaluation and all of that. Jason is coming on half-time starting September with Red Knot as a business partner. So that will help me a lot. Rod.
What you've described appears to me to be a culturally appropriate template for where you are at this time. Obviously, it's miles away from the traditional, and it's an exciting thing. But how do you do this in Eastern Europe or Australia or another place, a more urban area? Have you thought about that, or is anybody else working on that?
There's a group called, I don't know what they're called, Global Business as Mission or something like that are looking at this, and they're doing a lot in Europe. There's a few groups that are doing it around the world. Praxis is I think they're probably doing the best job in terms of developed countries. So there's a number of people doing it. I haven't seen it much from within the churches of Christ. In fact, I know a lot of people who are doing business as mission, but essentially what they're doing is they've realized they need a work permit that owning a business provides them in order to stay in a country and work, which is true. You can't just go into Tanzania as a missionary anymore and just show up and say, I want to be a missionary. They're not going to let you in the country. You've got to have some tangible service you're providing to people. And so I do know a number of business as mission people who are operating businesses at a loss, but funding it from the US or wherever, and it's just their mechanism for being in country. And that's something I wanted to stay away from. There's a lot of that. And that's kind of why I put this constraint on myself. I really, really wanted to actually have a profitable company and not kind of a front to show up in a country and be there. And we're not there yet. I mean, we're on a 5-year transition. We're 2.5 years in. And we've had most of our church support and individual donor support has stayed with us up to this 2.5-year mark. And now we've got 2.5 years more to get to profitable enough to cover everything based on kind of the schedule that I've worked out. And we're on schedule for that, but it's still a lot of work that lies ahead. But yeah, I'm not sure how you do it in Europe. There are people who are doing it. I don't know more about it. All right.